This is Jen Decker Wright for Resolute Recruiting.
Thank you very much for joining us. I saw the post on LinkedIn of all places, and it had something to do with a social and energy conference. And I said, you know what? 2 out of 3 ain't bad. I don't even know what the third is yet. So, what's going on with Jen Decker? What's Jen Decker Wright and this social that you guys have, and then the conference?
Well, we are an upstream services oil and gas recruiting firm, and we are hosting a networking event for anybody in the oil and gas industry that's visiting or local to Denver for this kind of kickoff to the Your Tech or Unconventional Resources Conference that's coming up on the 22nd of July. And I believe they're having a kickoff happy hour themselves, and we are extending that down the street at Live at Jack's, a jazz club with barbecue, drinks, and plenty of networking.
What was the name of that place?
Second event.
Sorry.
Live at Jack's.
Jack's. Okay.
And yeah, used to be Jazz at Jack's, and so we're just hosting a kind of a powwow get together where people of like mind in the industry, whether that's operators, service providers, equipment providers, you name it. Anybody that has a stake in oil and gas industry is more than welcome to show up and network and just kind of meet some new friends and possible business acquaintances and try to make some stuff happen. It's always a fun time. We're hosting. We're going to have like I said, plenty of cocktails, but we're getting some barbecue together, and it should be a nice event. It's our second one, and the last turnout was really nice too. Hoping to make this a little bit bigger, and with your help, it might really be big.
Well, maybe now with the next question, because we talk brass tacks here. Is it you got to pay at the door? Is it a cash bar? Is there someone sponsoring the whole event? If I'm going to the event, putting out a few bucks, is that what are my expectations in my wallet when I go to your event?
Yes. So expectations to the wallet are it is free entry. We are hosting the event. Resolute Recruiting is the host. And so definitely bring your business relevant ID card or business card rather, and your ID, because it is a club. So ID is required for entrance. It's Colorado, so they ID everyone. But we'll be handing out drink tickets, and anything above that, people can pay cash bar if they want to go above and beyond on some, high-end, whatever. If they're getting out their crazy Macallan shots, I don't think we're hosting that, but we will get the party started, so to speak.
Well, at least you're being honest about it, because I've been to a few oil and gas events, and the only thing I need to say is they know how to work hard and play hard. So
there's no question. I've been to a few myself, and we're not big pimping like the operators, but we're here to put on a good time and hopefully make it worthwhile for the folks that show up. Specifically for business connections, and there's a lot of political upheaval in Colorado in general, and I know a few people from WOGA, Women of Oil and Gas, Colorado Oil and Gas Association. Hopefully our friends at Energy Strong Colorado will be showing up or making an appearance, and anybody else that is there just to kind of figure out what's going on with Colorado and what the industry is doing here. But I am a national oil and gas upstream services recruiter, so it's really about just meeting our friends that are not local and extending the handshake.
Are you out of Colorado?
Yes.
So you're national, but you're actually physically in Colorado.
Yes, sir. Our office is located in Niwot, Colorado, which is north of Denver. Kind of towards the base of the Rockies going towards Boulder. It's gorgeous up here. I wouldn't want to work anywhere else, quite frankly, and it'll be exciting to go down to the big city, so to speak, and just meet a bunch of new people. The last conference that we hosted, a happy hour, was for the Doug conference, and that was a nice turnout. Hoping to make this a little bit bigger, though.
Jen Decker Wright with us, Resolute Recruiting, national oil and gas recruiting company, based, or at least she's based out of Colorado. I heard Boulder, Colorado. I was at the Energy Expo in Gillette recently, and I learned a new term, Boulder, Colorado Democrats or something like that, and it had to do with basically they blamed Boulder, Colorado for the whole banning of oil and gas in Colorado. So I got the picture pretty quick. You mentioned that you could see it from there. You're out of Colorado. Like-minded people here. Where what exactly is going on from your perspective? Because you work in oil and gas. I'll tell you where I'm coming from. Is 5 years ago. I go to Colorado all the time, and I usually stay in Fort Collins, and I drive into Denver. I'll be honest, I do not like Denver's traffic. It's out of my.
Oh, I don't either.
Yeah, I'm out of my element, and I know it. Fort Collins, I can move around pretty quick. I got Horsetooth. I can go hike. It's easy peasy. I like it. So, but I did start noticing that when I talked to people in the breakfast bars, they would look over their shoulder before they said they worked in oil and gas. And when I said I worked in the oil and gas industry, all of a sudden I got a sneer, just like when I used to say I was a Redskins fan. I'm not a Redskins fan anymore because I got shamed out of it. And so think about this. I was a little kid, and I used to play Cowboys and Indians, and I liked the bow and arrow, and my friend liked the guns, and we watched Cowboys Redskins on Sunday, and I picked the Redskins. He picked the Cowboys. Yeah. That's been my favorite team since I was 4 years old. All of a sudden now, I go to the grocery store, I'm wearing a Redskins hat, and I get shamed. I'm like, screw this. I don't even like Daniel Snyder. I'm done. I kind of felt like that in Colorado. Like, what's going on? This was 5 years ago. Well, flash forward to today, and you've got a governor saying, war on oil and gas. What is a like-minded person in Colorado these days? It's a different question because I don't think there is an easy answer for this.
Well, I was thinking, are you trying to trick me into something here? But there isn't an easy answer. Colorado overwhelmingly voted against Proposition 112 back in, when's our voting? November? Back in November, that was voted down, and that was the proposition to ban drilling within, I believe, 2,500 feet of whether it was a residence or a water, whatever. It was a really convoluted proposition that the state overwhelmingly voted down because it would have virtually prohibited any future drilling for oil and gas in Colorado, and now with the new governor in place, he's doing some, in my personal opinion, really shady business, trying to under the radar put legislation through. First off, on the first snowpocalypse we had of the season, I'll joke, but it was like a really bad snow, and he was diligently working from his car while running idle gas and working to prohibit future drilling or make it more in the county's purview to decide if drilling would happen in their individual counties. And that was all, from my understanding, sponsored by mostly Boulderites that the least amount of drilling, as far as I know, happen in that kind of that side of the realm. Weld County does, I think it's 80% of the oil production in the state, and it borders Boulder County, which is, again, personally, there's a lot of uninformed people that are afraid of what fracking or the oil and gas industry is because they don't have the proper information to make an educated argument one way or the other, whatever it is. And one of the things that I'm excited about and that I follow regularly is Energy Strong. They've got a real following out here, and their job is, and they're oil and gas industry professionals, and they're going to bat, going to the courthouses, going to government, gatherings, town halls, but they're also disseminating the information that they glean. I believe in as much as it can be, nonpartisan way. So it's not leaning right or left if you're going to talk politics, but it's definitely pro oil and gas, and because we care about our livelihoods in this industry. So I'm just excited because there's a lot of people that will be at this conference that I'll be able to personally just have conversation with as a layperson. I've only been in oil and gas recruiting for just over a year, and so I've had my plate full for learning all of the different realms, and there's no way in heck I'm ever going to, feel like I've accomplished any of that knowledge. And I'm sorry I'm rambling, but I'm just so excited to meet people and kind of suck in the information and learn as much as I can.
I'm very glad you are rambling. In fact, I wanted to ask you about your perception of oil and gas. I've just done 3 solid hours of interviews, and one of the topics that kept coming up over and over and over again, and I don't know your age, but was millennials. How there is this, there's this perception of millennials. And my thought is pretty simple, that I feel bad for millennials because they grew up in a very extreme world. Everything was the best, everything was the worst. And they didn't even have individualism. They sat at tables, not desks, and everything was team-oriented, everything else. So they were in a very polarizing world, and then they didn't have a lot of individualism. Now they're out in the real world, and they're trying to figure out their definition of them and their what they want to do in their life. And they're being told who they are every day by different groups and this and that. And I feel bad. I'm a
negative.
Yeah, it is. But it was prompted early by this, hey, they're going to save the world, these young entrepreneurs. And then all of a sudden on a dime, it just turned, it just completely turned. And again, it's that polarization part. I come from the Gen X demographic. Hey man, we're lazy, whatever, man, Colorado. Hey man, Colorado, right up my alley. And so the first gas and grass fest by Gen Xers, but millennials, like I said, they kind of got batted back and forth like ping pongs, and now they're in the real world. Where I'm going with this is, you've been in the energy industry now for a year. What I've seen over the last decade is when a millennial enters the oil and gas industry, they almost become their biggest cheerleader. Whereas when they were not in the industry, they almost had a socialized engineer perception of the energy industry, to where when they got into it, it was so wrong and so different, they almost overcorrect to become a cheerleader. I don't know if I'm rambling.
Well, no, I think I understand your question. Essentially you're saying it's polarizing because the millennials. You didn't say this, but it's my perception that, and I'm not a millennial. I'm just out of that, just a few years out of that generation, and they are very much so. They care about our environment. There's no question, right? They care about making paper straws, for God's sake, okay? For example, doing the little things that they can. And they're kind of dealt a rough hand, I think, based on what you said earlier. And because everybody says the word millennial, and there's always a negative connotation to it. I also think that they're really trying to prove themselves in an industry that, not necessarily the oil and gas industry, but any industry, when they go in, they have some really great ideas that may be progressive thinking and would actually progress a company, whichever business perspective that may be, offering new points of views that perhaps the senior management or ownership isn't willing to consider because it's worked fine the way it's always been, and we're not willing to change or grow or whatever. And specifically to the oil field, from what I've seen, is there's plenty of guys that are, because baby boomers are all getting to the point where they're very close to retirement if they aren't already, and we need to have the younger folks come up, whether that's millennials or whatever, and people in their 30s and 40s, need to be promoted more, from what I can see, a little more readily, and their ideas need to be considered a little bit more in order for businesses to maintain progressive forward movement, and maintain viability, and just keep up with technology, so to speak. I mean, there's people that think, oh, we've always done it this way, it's worked fine, and we're still making money. Well, more power to them. But the truth is if you don't continually infuse fresh blood or fresh perspective, or at least, very least, keep up on what's going on with your competitors, and do what you can to maintain that, you might find yourself, not with a job or a business. And so one of the ways they can do that would be to encourage growth from the bottom, and that would be from the younger generation that they need to train up. But the difficulty is there's a lot of younger generation that absolutely thinks they have to go to college and get into debt, and no kidding, like upwards of $100,000 in debt, and they will never, ever, ever pay it off unless they're in the oil and gas industry or some very specialized business. So turns out college degree is great and everything, but you don't need that in the oil and gas industry for the most part. So I would encourage people to just apply and start getting in on the ground up if they can.
Well, you'd like our program. 6 years ago, we started doing stories on, actually 7 years ago, the trades and the 2-year degrees versus the 4-year degrees. That the 4-year degrees were not giving you a long-term net gain. They were producing too much debt for someone to really get back on their feet with the job market the way it was. Whereas if you went in the oil and gas industry, or even if you got your CDL, went out and became a truck driver, by the time you're 22 years old, you could have $500,000 in the bank and go start a Subway franchise or go do whatever you want. I mean, there's the world's your oyster at that point. You can go to school then if you want to, but there was just a transition happening in the marketplace that was just so apparent. I used to joke, when I was in college, all the computer programmers, there were CSI and MSI and MIS and all these different acronyms. I used to joke, say, you're writing code to put yourself out of business, right? They'd be like, what? And I'd be like, that's what you're doing, man. So lo and behold, that's ends up what happens to some people. But by the way, folks, Jen Decker Wright with us, Resolute Recruiting, real treat. Not only is she a oil and gas recruiter, but she also lives in Colorado, so she gets the national conversation, but the local perspective, and it's a rare thing to have these days. I did want to ask you about women in the industry. We talked about the millennials and kind of that retirement. By the way, 70% of the industry will be retired by 2022, I'm told. 2022. Wow. So, yeah, they call it the big cruise shift. I called it the retirement issue. I ended up talking to a number of people in a conference in Gillette, and we were all talking about the same deal, but we just had different names for it. And so it's about 70% of the industry by 2022 will be retired, and it'll be a whole new industry. So there is a bit of a vetting process going on right now in the industry because of the younger thought process of, okay, how environmental are we here? Like, are we, are we Boulder, Colorado, or are we, Grand Junction, Colorado?
I will
somewhere in between.
My personal perspective is I'm a very middle of the road in anything with anything like politics. I'm middle of the road. I like to call myself a think for myselfer. Like, give me all of the information. I will also seek out information, and I'm not talking about from partisan sites or, something that clearly will just align with my own views. I am absolutely willing to listen to other people's perspectives. And I personally feel more confident about the industry that I'm in now that I have more personal knowledge about it. Meaning, if somebody wants to say, "Oh, you're in oil and gas," how does that make you feel? Contributing to the downfall of the environment. If that's what they said, I don't think anybody would ever have the brass cojones to say some stuff like that to me. But if they did, I would be prepared to have an intelligent conversation with them about, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize your point of view. I'm interested in learning more about how you think we can sustain our environment, and what are the solutions? Because there's a lot of people that'll complain about just anything, not just this environment issue. In general, people complain, bitch and moan, and then they don't offer up solutions or what the next step is to remedy said problem, right? And one of the things that the Boulderites, I will lump it in because I have to say it's like their city car is a Subaru or a Prius, and that's fine.
What? Not a Tesla? I'm just kidding. I had to take a shot there. Sorry.
And Tesla. And nope, you got it. That's in there too, but that's for the other folks that actually can afford to drive nice cars. Because they also live in a big house that is fueled by natural gas that is locally drilled. So, and it's drilled within Weld County, most likely, or somewhere on a farmland, or in my case, thank God, I was lucky. I moved into a house in Thornton, and 2 months later got word from an EMP that they were going to be drilling in our area, and so now I'm getting oil and gas money, so I don't mind.
Here's one of the things that we talk about on this program. Sorry to sidebar for just a second, because we're a non-political show, but some of the things we do talk about stems around some policy normally when it happens. But one of the things that we are talking about right now is, what if we shifted the subsidies that have gone to solar and wind? Okay, for 40 years now, for 40 years, solar and wind have gotten subsidies, and they put the benchmarks out. Okay, 20 years they got a lot of solar and wind subsidies. Well, now they're like apparently the next generation of energy, yet they haven't proven anything in 40 years, to the tune to where every person that put solar panels on their house, their McMansions in Texas, they didn't gain any money. Okay, the solar industry and the wind industry promised they would have affordable energy for us 20 years ago. We gave them more money. They promised again. They don't have it. The most affordable thing to the consumer that solar offers is probably a cell phone charger for when you go camping. Maybe, no, I'm being totally serious though. Maybe like, your ice shack on the weekends, you power it up during the week with the solar panel. You can get maybe a couple days worth of energy. My point is you can't do much with it. Wind, forget about it. Farmers 150 years ago were more efficient with the windmills than we are today. And that is, all they did is they used water to, they used wind to get water out of the ground and basically power their barn.
Oh, yeah.
That was more efficient than what we're doing today. And in fact, those farmers had a better reclamation program than what we have today for their windmills. Okay, now,
well,
what if we...
Let me ask you just really quick, too, Jason, that something that people don't take into account is how do those windmills get, built in the first place? And
it's ridiculous. And then you rip out the forests
with diesel.
Well, not only that, but you got to rip out the forests, and then it upsets the migration patterns of birds. And listen, there's wind energy. Right. Wind energy is probably, and I'm being totally honest, probably the least environmental out of all the energies, and that includes coal. Okay, I mean totally.
Wow, okay.
I'm being totally honest when I say that, because America's air has progressively gotten cleaner for the last 100 years, and it is one of the top in the nation, and we are the ones bringing regulations over to other countries. So I've had it with the cult of environmentalism on our program, because it is no longer political. They are affecting policy and the way people do lives. Now, if we want to live like Germany, who just fired up the coal plants again last month because their 10-year push on renewables didn't work, but guess what? Their energy bill is now times 4 to 5 what it was 5 years ago. So if
I read that too.
So if America wants your energy bill to be quadrupled, and then you just got to fire up the coal plants anyways, keep going. You keep going, America, because that's what's happening. So sorry, you got me on a soapbox here. Normally I don't do this. I want to ask you about women and energy next, which is terrible because it's like, we're leading, we're all over the board here. So what we're trying to have a civil conversation about is the solar and wind energies. If you were to give them a letter grade, they would get a D or probably an F, because that's by their standards, no one else's. Now, what if we took 50% of those or even 100% of those subsidies, shifted them to natural gas? Number one, it would solve the flaring issue in the Bakken and down in the Permian and other areas quickly, because the energy industries, you pay more taxes than anybody, you got more regulations than anybody, and guess what? You still make sure that the churches have bake sales, and you still make sure the Little League people have baseball uniforms. Now you got to go fund every science project there is too? No, it ain't happening. I get it. So imagine if they got a subsidy, not a tax credit, a subsidy, so that all of these, that crazy guy up in Canada who's mining bitcoins from natural gas, give him some money to try it. Why not? It might solve something. How about that guy down in Texas who's figured out a way to turn natural gas into water so he can put a greenhouse in the middle of the desert? Oh, that sounds like a good idea. So what I'm getting at is you might find some new super plastic where everybody can have a pool in their backyard for $1,500, or better yet,
that'd be nice.
Or better yet, XL Energy, who I believe is in Colorado, can do what they want to do, which is put in fueling stations in everybody's garage. So if you had a natural gas powered car, you could fuel it in at the end of the night and it'd be charged up, ready to go by the beginning of the day. How's that for green? Now you're not flaring anything. You're turning vehicles into That's what I mean. My point is that if the subsidies were shifted, all of a sudden the creative innovation, smart, clever capitalists would come out of the woodwork instead of being funneled down the solar and wind. All right. So you heard my soapbox. Yeah. The basic question is about natural gas subsidies with a purpose, with an actual purpose. We could solve the flaring problem in 5 years.
Well, I think that a natural gas subsidy would make sense. I've seen people fueling up with, natural gas. I know the cars or trucks that are converted to that, for like the Forest Service, for example. I believe they use trucks that use LNG, and I don't believe they run as far or as long, meaning they have to fill up every single day anyway. So if they're going to be
in Detroit, Ford has some experiments going, and they can't go on more than 150 miles in a day.
Yeah, it's really minimal.
But for a lot of people running around town, when you're only driving 10 miles to work or 5 miles back, it works really well. That sort of thing.
Yeah, if you have that, like you said, like a fueling station in your garage, or not, maybe not your garage.
No, it's actually the garage. It's just all it is it goes from the gas line right to your car. That's how easy it is. That's what I mean. That's where the technology is. But Cummins had to stop investing in engines because they couldn't figure out a way to get those trucks over the Rocky Mountains. Cummins engines is one of the big engines
I know.
Okay, they go into trucks and semis, and they couldn't figure out how to get over the Rocky Mountains. And then the downturn happened, and guess what? The downturn happens, R&D goes away right away. R&D goes away pretty quick. And that's where I'm not trying to get in a political battle here or say one energy is better than the other. All I'm saying is that solar and wind has had a 40-year body of work, and they've gotten 40 years of subsidies. And natural gas, oil and gas doesn't get subsidies. They're lucky if they can get a tax break. In North Dakota, they get taxed like 11.5%. It's like one of the highest in the nation. Yet when they try to get a tax break, everybody calls it a subsidy. It ain't a subsidy. It's a tax break. So I don't know. We're into words here, and we like to keep people true to their meaning. You were saying something earlier about shady, and I thought, actually, if you look up the word shady in the dictionary, what your governor did in Colorado was actually shady. He presented himself as a certain way, and and when it came to it, he wasn't that. And he thinks he did it for the greater good, and so it was justified in his mind, and that's why he believes that his shady behavior is okay. But at the end of the day, it's still defined as shady by Webster's dictionary. So it
definitely is, and I there's a lot of it's disappointing more than anything that when your state I don't care what way you voted, but you vote and you vote a certain way, and then the majority speaks to what they want to pass, and then he directly went against that, but figured out a loophole to circumvent the terminology. Let's say he went to, oh well, we couldn't get that done because it was voted down, but let's do this and let's make it really difficult and slow up, gum up the works, so to speak. And it just matters who's lining their pockets, I guess, the most. But it doesn't make a lot of sense to me because I feel like Colorado's pockets are lined by the energy industry a lot because we produce a lot here. I think we produce. We're in the top 5. The top oil producing counties in the U.S. Weld County is number 3, which is where I drive through to come to work every day. And they do 13.7 million barrels a month. Number 3 in the nation. And yet Colorado state governor is trying to dampen that by making it in the county's best interest to decide if they can drill or not. And well, that's fine. Weld County is on board with the oil and gas industry, but there are certain cities within the county that don't want anything to do with it, and that's fine. I mean, that's their prerogative if people are voting that way. But what the problem is that the commissioners of different chairs or whatever, they just decide, no, we're not going to do this, or we're not going to have a public vote, or in fact, we're going to put this through so quickly nobody has time to even know we're doing it. That's what's shady. So it's just all under the radar, they think. But, I hope they remember that when the next voting season comes around. And I hope people actually choose to get out and vote the way that they believe. Again, whichever way that is, I just encourage people to vote, period.
I could
are right.
I could tell you from an outside perspective that did not follow this on a day-to-day, nor was I enveloped in the day-to-day culture of it, was after the governor won, and I followed the SB, was it 112, Prop 112, and then SB 181, so it had been Prop 112 that was on the ballot. So I followed that, and I followed the governor's race and everything like that, and honestly, I kind of got all jumbled up with the whole SB 181 and the Prop 112. I got confused because it happened so fast. What caught my attention is when the governor came out and called it the war on oil and gas. I turned my head and went, whoa, Colorado just took a hard turn there. I didn't realize they were so anti-fossil fuels to where the governor would come out and call it the war on oil and gas. And that to me was shady because I thought, okay, if you would have campaigned like that, I don't think you would have won, buddy.
He wouldn't have.
And okay, so he did not campaign like that, right? He did not, because that was the first time I heard that term was after he was elected. Okay, all right.
Yeah, absolutely not. He's from Boulder, from what I understand. So there's, in hindsight, I voted my conscience and I voted him, which I'm almost ashamed to say. But
jeez, I better edit that out quick. Hang on.
I know. Just cut it out, Jason. I'm saying it only because I agreed with certain platforms that he ran on. None of them had to do with the oil and gas industry, by the way. And do you think I would have voted that way, considering I was in this industry at that point? No.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous, And I voted no against 112. And most of the state did as well. I was a proponent or an advocate and was posting up a storm about people. You better get out and vote if you don't think this can affect your livelihoods. You're wrong. That kind of a thing. And again, not to be on a soapbox, but for information reasons. You don't realize what this is actually going to do. It's a fancy worded thing that, it's not going to be within a waterway or in your backyard. And it's like, well, then quit building your friggin' houses on top of a well site. How about that? So the whole problem, one of the major problems here is that the issue in Firestone, Colorado, where the unfortunately 2 lives were lost. I understand that something wasn't plugged properly. And so there was an explosion or a major fire at least. And these people are saying, well, the oil and gas industry needs to be safer and they need to do more. They need to do more and more and more. Well, first off, accidents do happen in any industry. And last I checked, maybe don't friggin' build a residential whatever community on top of a well pad. I'm not a rocket scientist, but I'm pretty sure you on purpose shouldn't do those kinds of things, or you should be careful with where you're digging. And I don't think it's those people's fault. It was an accident. Accidents happen.
No, I think there's a disconnect. When I grew up, energy was never political, and it's political now, and that's unfortunate, And the disconnect I'm talking about is probably the same one that happened with agriculture, to where people don't realize a hamburger that started as a cow. They don't realize that. Now they've kind of it's true. There was a time where they'll eat it, and if they knew, they'd probably something different. But so there was a disconnect in the ag industry. It worked out for the benefit, and to where now people are okay with it as long as they know where it comes from, as long as it's locally sourced and massaged by small children over in China or something like that, and it's all good. Korea, yeah, you got to make sure that the beef's nice and massaged and fed kelp every day, and that sort of thing, whatever. So I get that part of it, and I think the energy industry. There was a gentleman from Canada that pointed this out to me, that the energy industry spent a long time doing government affairs, and all of a sudden the government got really polarized and political, and the politicians just started lumping everything in red and blue. And the oil and gas industry just got lumped in with the red all of a sudden over a 3 to 4 year process. Yeah. And then now your representatives are now your PR people, which you don't want that, because now all of a sudden oil and gas is red and blue. And to where, and I've heard it from you a few times in this interview, you've gone on the defense a few times off of something you've said because you're so used to people coming back at you. And I'm like, hey, Jen Decker Wright, you're in a safe space here. And so you can talk as freely as you want about whatever. I'll let you, lift yourself up and hang yourself in the same sentence,
You're right. I do try to be very careful about what I say. One, because the industry I'm in, like I said, I would never admit who I voted for before because, like you just said, they've painted it red. It's only red. It's not, or oil and gas is red. And if you go another way, then you're voting for you're the enemy or whatever. But I'm not the enemy. I'm over here trying to make deals happen and better people's lives. Genuinely speaking, that's my main goal in this, and that's what feeds me and drives me to keep doing this. And it helps that I really like the industry. Prior to this job, again, something that it's almost like, do I even admit this? Prior to this industry, I was in car sales, new cars and trucks and used cars and trucks. And I did really well for myself in sales of that vehicular persuasion. And I will tell you what, I friggin' have had gas guzzling beasts. And you know what? I currently own a car that I have to put premium in. And you know what? When I go to the gas tank, just the same as anybody else, or the gas station, and I go to fill up, I'm like, the prices are raising up. But now the really cool thing is I go, good, let them raise, because we need this for our community, the oil and gas community, which is what makes literally this world go around for the type of lifestyles that we're used to. I mean, you don't go buy Nike shoes or go buy a brand new bike, just literally a bicycle. Where does the paint come from? Chemicals that paints that bike. Where does the rubber, or the ability to process the rubber, come from? The oil for the chain. Like, even if you decided you were going to strictly go down to, I'm just walking and riding my bike everywhere, I'm not going to even have a vehicle. Well, good. More power to you. You'll be really in shape. But you also need those, fancy bike shorts with the spandex and the whatever in them, the cushion to, pad your butt. And a lot of that stuff, the makeup I am wearing on my face is produced with chemicals from the oil and gas industry.
So let me ask you this,
I,
because you're what you're describing is that disconnect, and it's people are
yes.
so disconnected, and they don't care because they take it for granted. It's I kind of compare it to the dishes. You have to do it. Nobody really likes it. They kind of complain about it. It's just part of our daily life, that sort of thing. My question is, how do we connect with them again? How do we connect with them again? Because listen, I'm not even talking about the average person. I'm talking about that guy that bikes every day because he doesn't want to drive a car, but he wears, cologne that maybe has some petroleum products in it, and he's got the biker shorts on. Or you have the guy that is driving the Tesla in, say, North Dakota, where 70 to 90% of the electricity comes from coal. So here you got a guy driving a Tesla complaining about the coal industry, powering it up every night from the coal industry. How the heck are they so disconnected? That's what I can't get.
I honestly, it's a question I don't even know how to answer, other than the reason you caught it with me, that I'm trying to watch my first off, I'm trying to watch my language, because every other word out of my mouth half the time is a cuss word. So, secondly, I'm trying to watch how I say something, because when you're in a conversation, or admittedly, possibly a heated debate with somebody like that there's a disconnect. Like, they're clearly not understanding, and maybe in your own head you're going, how is it that they can't see the forest for the trees here? How do they not understand that car that they're driving, regardless of it being a fully electric or perhaps a hybrid, still runs because of the oil and gas industry? It is produced in factories, utilizing the fruits of oil and gas industry. Okay, the factory has to run on electricity or natural gas or whatever, right? It's also man-powered by people and robots, and all of that there's lubrication in the parts. There's, you name it, chemicals. All of that stuff comes from the oil and gas industry. This is just fact. There's no arguing it, and yet, when you put logic in front of a person, and I'm not talking about I feel like there's probably better arguments, but because I'm a layperson still, I'm still learning about this industry, so I don't claim to know everything about it. I hope that's not how it sounds, but I definitely think that if people just stopped and were actually willing to use a political term, reach across the aisle, literally open your brain, open your hands, and listen to the other side and give it a shot. Do not wait your turn to speak. Listen and shut your mouth and let it sink in, and then maybe consider that you can change your mind about something. You don't have to be stuck in your way of thinking, unless that's what you choose to do, and I guess that's our God-given right as Americans. We can do whatever we want, except, apparently being ignorant, or, willfully ignorant is somehow encouraged as of late, it seems.
Jen Decker Wright, Resolute Recruiting with us. Kind of wrapping up here. We're going to get back to the social happy hour happening 22nd from 5:30 to 8 p.m. in Denver during the YourTech conference. Women in Energy, and then we'll summarize back to the social happy hour again. But you've been pretty involved for the last year, you said, in oil and gas. You are a female. You mentioned that the social happy hour is going to probably have some people from a Women in Energy chapter that is going to be there. Talk to me about your experience and what's going on with Women in Energy these days.
Well, again, I've been at this a year in this industry, but I'm also a woman, and I come from male-dominated fields typically. Like I said before, I was in car sales for 4 years prior to this, and I think that women in this industry, one, have to have a thicker skin because we are the minority. I'm misquoting, I'm sure, but I believe the statistics are around 10 to 13% women to men ratio. I'm not really sure. Maybe
Seems a
you have
little
that
high.
there, but does it?
It does. Honestly, at the last 3 conferences I was at, I'd say easily under 10% women were there.
Really?
Easily. Yeah.
I got that from a woman that has been in the industry like 13 years, and she said, when I started, Lord, it was way lower, but maybe it's closer to 10, maybe 13 now, and that maybe that's an optimistic statistic, which 85% of all statistics are made up on the spot. So that being said, I'm optimistic for women's role in the oil and gas industry. I think that more women are being encouraged to become a part of it. But frankly, we're not there yet to where there's plenty of guys that do not want to edit their language or their I'm going to say it, good old boy mentality that this is a man's world and this is a man's role and a man's job. But I would say that there are plenty of men in the industry, dare I say the majority, that are advocates for women in this business, having a fair shake, actually being able to be promoted and work their way up properly. On the flip side, as a salesperson, an experienced salesperson, I have seen that a goodly amount of women have gone straight into sales roles and are expected to go out and make relationships or relational business contacts, and not really fully aware of the product or service that they're selling. So I think that gives women it's doing us a disservice to put people in that kind of a position without full training of and knowledge of the product or service that you're selling. Meaning, it ultimately does look bad if you go out there, you don't know anything, but you're pretty. And I can say that as a woman because I've seen it. I've seen it in my prior industry where they hired the pretty girl. They came in and the pretty girl thought she could just get everything handed to her. Well, guess what? I'm pretty, but I'm also a hard worker, and I'm modest. And so I'm just saying that it's not about that. You really need to put the effort in, and I think most women that are in this industry understand full well that they need to outwork their male competitors if they want to be successful. And if they don't know it and they're listening to this, now you know. Period. That's it. It doesn't mean it's fair, but life ain't fair. Do it.
Wow, I didn't expect that answer. I heard something similar at the Energy Expo in Gillette, which kind of made me just phrase it as, what do you think about women in the energy industry? I didn't really frame it like a certain direction. And what I heard in Gillette was there's a group of females that seem to be more concerned about social media and posting instead of getting out there and getting their hands dirty. And that's kind of what you just said. So I'm kind of like, oh, wow, I didn't realize this was going on in the industry. And here I am probably going to get shot for being the messenger, I guess. But that's an interesting thought.
What you just said too, Jason. So I think it's two separate things. Yes, you need to get out and hustle, period. Okay, that's what salespeople should be doing. And it goes for men, too. For God's sake, don't sit on your ass at home, just posting stuff on LinkedIn all day. You legitimately should be on the phone, and you should be in the offices and setting meetings. There's no question. That's how business is done, period. Now, with the social media posting, that's the caveat I wanted to say is you need to be on social media nowadays if you want to be progressive and with the times, because we talked about that baby boomer retirement, progressive gap when the millennials were trying to raise them up through the field right now. Well, how do they communicate? Well, with the newest technology and with social media. So that's what they're used to doing. That's how they're used to communicating. But it needs to be a mixture of both, and I would say more heavily on the personal interaction, actually having a phone call if you can't meet them face-to-face, and then otherwise meeting them face to face. I personally was so intimidated by my current job as I went into it, because I thought, oh, how will they know I'm being authentic? I'll just be on the phone. I won't be seeing them in person, and I can't read their body language, and I can't, I just thought it would be harder. My job would be harder for me, and the truth is it isn't. And now I get a really great mixture, because I get to meet people when they're visiting in town, or clients that are here in Denver. And that's one of my favorite parts of my job, is when I'm actually meeting people in person. Hence this, networking event that we're doing. I'm psyched out of my mind that I get to meet a ton of people that I've been solely on the phone with because they've been out of state, but they'll be here in town for this conference. Or I'm excited because I'll probably meet people I didn't even know that I already knew, because I've never met them in person. You see what I mean? Like, I know them from the phone only, and it'll be like, Jen, you know me. I'm, Joe Smith or whatever. And I'll be like, oh, well, this is great. It's a pleasant surprise. But for the women into the industry, for men in the industry equally, all of this work, the connections and relationships and business and all of that does not work if you're only on social media, period.
And I wrote down some of the pros and cons aren't gender exclusive, because, we're talking about women in energy, and really I think that the part that we want to walk away from is, there's some pros and cons and some growing pains that are happening, but the bigger picture is that more and more women are becoming a part of the energy industry, and that's a good thing. And that is a good thing. Yes,
absolutely.
And I think it's bringing more of that compromise that you were talking about earlier. It is it is making the industry a little bit more professional, I think. But at the same time, it hasn't lost that essence of capitalism and that enablement of opportunity. Enablement of opportunity. I like that. So, okay, social happy hour. Go ahead and give us the rundown one more time. So as we conclude the interview, we'll end it on I don't want to say high note to a Colorado person, on the social happy hour note.
Well, it is illegal here, but not if you're in the oil and gas industry. There's randos. No, we're having our oil and gas industry professional happy hour hosted by Resolute Recruiting USA live at Jack's. It's on the 16th Street Mall in downtown Denver, and our timeline is Monday, July 22nd from 5:30 to 8 p.m. We are hosting drinks. We'll have some food, some barbecue there, and again, plenty of free networking where you can meet people that maybe you otherwise would never meet in the industry, and you never know who you're going to meet that can help you out down the line. So really excited. I believe Your Tech has an initial happy hour kickoff to the conference. It's usually after the conference has been, the booths have been set up and whatnot. I believe they're doing something like from 5 to 7. And so maybe some people will be at that and then swing by our thing afterwards. But we have plenty of people that are like, no, we're skipping that. Let's go have this happy hour. It's less formalized, we'll say.